We'll move to 8.5 now. So it's the Edinburgh Women's Aid and Support for Trans Women Council. There were two deputations heard in person on this earlier today. Councillor Staniforth.
Lord Provost, it was never our intention to defund services, as I hope the amendment we put forward makes clear. However, it is our intention to accept the SNP Lib Dem composite. We're resigned to the fact we won't get a comprehensive review, but at least that leaves us with a briefing that will identify gaps in services for trans and non-binary people. I also want to make it clear that I think Edinburgh Women's Aid does excellent work. However, this council would surely not allow any other minority to be automatically excluded from services. And I found it quite disturbing how the deputation sought to weaponise the needs of other minorities to exclude trans people. We've seen in America that the rolling back of trans people's rights and discrimination against trans people is just the start. It is the first step towards the dominance of cis, het, white men over all others. Every time any public figure in the UK stands up for trans people or tries to expand trans people's rights, there are those in the media and social media who will stir up a transphobic mob against them. I have experience of this.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to finish.
Is nothing less than the exclusion of trans people from public life. And decisions like this from Edinburgh Women's Aid only empower them.
You've had over a minute. Thank you. And to second, Councillor Mumford.
Thanks, Lord Provost. People here will have heard me say in committee more than once that I have friends who are only here today because of the excellent work of violence against women organisations in this city. I also have friends who are not here today because of transphobia. This motion is not about withdrawing funding from vital services, but about making sure that all women are supported in an intersectional way. Trans women need to know what support they can access in the city, some of which is indeed provided by Edinburgh Women's Aid. We agree that honesty and transparency are vital, especially in the face of the misinformation in the media and the rampant transphobia and misogyny we are all witnessing, which impact on all women, trans and cis. The law on this is not settled. The definition of women and man is still undergoing legal scrutiny, as well as to whether single sex includes trans people, as I believe it does. What all legal experts are agreed upon is that the Equality Act of 15 years ago is not explicit on these definitions, and that while it's fair to discriminate against individuals in certain circumstances, it's not appropriate to apply blanket discrimination against an entire group of people. Equally safe is clear that to challenge violence against women and girls, we must challenge damaging gender stereotypes. I don't want to be seen as less than a woman because I don't have kids, or given suspicious looks in the toilet because I have short, fabulous hair. This is the route down which biological essentialism leads, and why it's so important to speak out clearly and say that trans women are women and we stand with them.
Thanks very much. That takes us to the amendment by the administration. Councillor Marr.
For brevity, I want to give an example why a trauma-informed support for single-sex spaces matters vitally. I have a very close family member who has Down syndrome, who has dementia, and who needs intimate personal care. She is also a rape survivor. She's a survivor of 2 separate rapes. She is extremely vulnerable, and a trauma-informed approach tells us that she is entitled to have the intimate care she needs given by a woman. A trauma-informed approach to supporting women who've been the victim of male violence must include offering single-sex facilities such as domestic violence refuges. Under the Equality Act 2010, it is lawful for service providers such as Edinburgh Women's Aid to provide such a facility, and they must be able to do so as a matter of policy. And I'm utterly content by the account from the deputation this morning that they also offer support and services to trans women who equally need the support that they are offered by Edinburgh Women's Aid. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Marr. And second, Councillor Watt? Or is it Councillor Fachenda?
I'm just going to formally second that, Lord Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Fachenda. From the SNP group, Councillor McInnes.
My apologies. I was very pleased to hear from the Greens that there was no intention about potential defunding of Edinburgh Women's Aid in their original motion. It's very clear from the very first paragraph of our SNP Lib Dem composite text that we do not want to see this happen. We recognise the valuable, vital work Edinburgh Women's Aid delivers for vulnerable members of our communities, and that we as a council remain committed to supporting that organisation in its endeavours. It's important, however, for us also to support and affirm the rights and dignity of trans people who form a small but important part of our community. The amendment that we've brought forward clearly states that we're committed to the rights of all women, including cis and trans women, and that the Council believes that support must be available to all those who depend upon it, including trans people. We've got two asks in this amendment, and I'll be quick. The first is to have the Council leader set out to Edinburgh Women's Aid the importance of providing services to trans women and to ask how the organisation can further facilitate this. It is not intended in any way to undermine the work of Edinburgh Women's Aid.
I'm afraid you'll have to be really quick with the second point because we're
intended
a minute.
To build on to widen the conversation about delivery of much needed services to trans and non-binary women. That is the second ask that we have, that we are properly briefed on the services that are available to trans and non-binary members of our community so that we can take future decisions around funding, etc., in a better informed manner.
Thanks very much, Councillor McInnes. And a seconder?
That's me, Lord Provost. I was going to second this amendment, but we're now going to withdraw it in favour of the composite motion.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. That's great. In that case, can move the amendment by the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Everyone who has experienced abuse, violence, rape, or any form of trauma deserves compassion and protection, regardless of their identity. At the same time, every survivor processes trauma differently. Everyone experiences trauma differently and responds differently, and no one has the right to dictate what should or shouldn't make another person feel safe. So can we all commit to listening to each other, listening to both cis and trans women? Can we work together to create solutions that support traumatised people? Women's Aid is doing incredible work. Can we work with them? We're not here to vilify Women's Aid. We need to support them to offer multiple therapy options so that people have a choice, ensure therapy is tailored to individuals. Can we also consider for a moment that trans women experience situations where they feel unsafe? As a friend of mine said to me last night, a trans woman, our voices are virtually non-existent in the discourse. It is vital that every survivor has the opportunity to heal in a space where they feel safe. We can't tell people how they should heal from their own trauma. That's ridiculous. But we can stop fighting. We can have constructive conversations and find ways to support the expert services to help the traumatised people that need them.
Thanks very much. And to second, Councillor Dixter-Downey.
I'm happy to do that formally. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Dixter-Downey. The addendum by the Green Group. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Given the composite amendment covers the issues here, we are withdrawing this amendment addendum.
Thanks very much, Councillor Booth. And an amendment by the Conservative Group. Councillor Mullett.
Thank you, Lord Provost. We live in a time where defending women's rights to private spaces and services has become controversial and divisive. I am old enough to remember that in some careers, women were expected to leave when they became pregnant, were expected to yield their positions and opinions for men. Today, we will not yield, and I ask you to support our amendment, which recognises the important work of Edinburgh's Women's Aid, and that they carry this out in accordance with the law. The Equality Act 2010, which applies in Scotland, allows for the provision of single-sex services and permits organisations such as Edinburgh Women's Aid to exclude individuals who have the protected characteristic of gender reassignment from certain spaces where this is a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. What is more legitimate than that of providing services to women who have been abused? We heard the statistics in the deputation this morning. Most people who experience domestic violence are women. Most will have been abused by men. There are provisions in place for those who do not fall into these categories. If we need to do more for these groups, then let this not be at the expense of women who have been asked to yield once too often.
Thanks very much, Councillor Mowat. And second, Councillor Mary-Claire-Munro.
Thank you, Lord Provost. We have brought this amendment because we believe it is essential to prioritise the safety and the well-being of women who have suffered from domestic abuse. Edinburgh Women's Aid has been serving women exclusively for 50 years. Our amendment reflects a commitment to safeguarding these critical services which provide vital support for women and girls who have experienced the profound trauma, Lord Provost, of domestic abuse. Now, we must always strive for inclusivity and the protection and the rights of all individuals, including trans individuals, but we must ensure that women's services remain intact and able to meet the specific needs of women survivors of domestic abuse. This is why we are proposing this amendment to affirm our support for the continuation of single-sex spaces at Edinburgh's Women's Aid. The Scottish Conservatives, we have and we always will continue to protect the rights of women and girls to have single-sex spaces. This has been our position both at Holyrood and here at local government level. It remains steadfast today. Women's safety must always come first.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
That's your minute. Thank you. Thanks very much. We now move to the composite amendment. Who is proposing that? Yeah, Councillor Battis.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I move the composite amendment and want to emphasise the support for Edinburgh Women's Aid and the need for the same, need for all women, cis and trans, to be supported. I move the composite. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. And is there a seconder for the composite? Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Lord Provost. All victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence should have an expectation that publicly funded services are there for them. And that does create genuine conflicts sometimes. But right now, that conflict has meant that trans women and non-binary people understandably feel that this is not the case for them. As one of my constituents said in an email to me just today, convincing my trans child that they have a place in this city's future can be really hard. All we are asking in this composite amendment is that publicly funded services protect all women, cis and trans. I genuinely hope that this amendment can be the beginning of a productive conversation with Women's Aid and all other providers so that we can ensure that the great work they do is available to all victims. Thank you, Lord.
Thanks very much indeed. Okay. Now that takes us to back to Councillor Staniforth to indicate. Is there a second composite? Sorry, I hadn't been made aware of that. Okay, mover of the second composite, but somebody who hasn't. Yes, you didn't speak before. That's right.
Yep. So in moving this composite, I need to speak in support of Women's Aid. 50 years they've been providing services in this city for traumatised women, providing them when there were no services, campaigning for them, campaigning so that women can actually stay in their homes rather than having to seek refuge. The motion that was put before us today, they came and answered it in a deputation. They explained how they provide the services that are needed for trans people and non-binary people alike. And then to continue to aver that they don't is irresponsible. What are you trying to do? Stop trans women from going to Women's Aid by telling them that they won't be well received. That is just irresponsible. Women's Aid will provide a service. They do provide a service to women and to trans women and non-binary people alike. So I can't support something that suggests that they don't, and that's why I'm moving this composite.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Watt. And the seconder, Councillor White.
Lord Provost, thank you. This composite brings together what we have put forward and the Labour Party put forward because we feel very strongly about this. I believe the motion itself is iniquitous. Councillor Staniforth may say he doesn't seek to defund Women's Aid, but that seems to be the aim of paragraph 3. I cannot see why you would write it that way otherwise. And the motion completely ignores the work that we heard Women's Aid tell us today that they already use, their experienced work to help
all sorts of categories of people, including trans women. But most importantly, they have to be able to use that experience to decide when they need a single-sex service. Those services provide for people who wouldn't otherwise use the service. They have to feel safe, and that's how they can choose to best assist their clients. We should respect their expertise around that. This is, as we heard, a charity that gets a 6 rating from the Care Inspectorate, a top rating. I can't see why others don't see the need to protect single-sex spaces and services, especially for abused women at their most vulnerable point.
Thanks very much, Councillor White. Okay, now we move back to Councillor Staniforth to indicate which, if any, of the amendments and addendums he's prepared to accept.
As I said at the start of my speech, Lord Provost, we will accept the SNP Liberal Democrat composite amendment. We will not accept any other amendments.
Thanks very much indeed. In that case, I have to go through the list just now. Okay, so given that, does the administration still wish to pursue its own amendment separately?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll come on to the composites later. Does the SNP group wish to pursue its own amendment separately? Okay, thank you. Does the Liberal Democrat group wish to pursue its own amendment separately? No. Okay. The Green group's already indicated that you're withdrawing in favour of composite 1, I think. And does the Conservative group still wish to pursue its own amendment separately?
No.
Okay. Then we've had an indication from the mover of the motion that they're prepared to accept composite 1. So in that case, so the movers of composite 1 do they wish to pursue that separately or as part of the motion? Just pursue it as part of the motion. Movers of composite 2, do you still wish to pursue that separately? Yes. Okay. In that case, we're going to have a vote. We won't need the bell rung again between, I think, composite 1 and composite 2, basically. Yeah.
Okay. We are on item 8.5. It's motion by Councillor Staniforth, Edinburgh's Women's Aid and Support for Trans Women. We have the motion by Councillor Staniforth, moved by himself, seconded by Councillor Mumford, which accepts the SNP and Liberal Democrat composite. Against that, we have the second composite, which was between the administration and the Conservatives, moved by Councillor Watt, seconded by Councillor White. So, motion by Councillor Staniforth against the administration Conservative composite. Can I take the votes, please, for the composite amendment? Thank you. And for the motion, please. Thank you. That is 38 votes for the motion, 22 for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay. Thanks very much.